on my first step ever. If this is your first time listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, you are in for a treat because this is for everyone out there who know that they have a dream, who knows that they what they want to do. And at times you have taken those little steps, but you have taken three, four more steps backwards because sometimes, somewhere, you've heard people say, you won't be able to do it, or this is too risky. Or sometimes your inner voice has said that, yeah, what people are saying is right. Maybe you're going to fail. Maybe you're going to embarrass yourself. And then you go back to doing something that really doesn't align with you. But somewhere back in your mind or in your heart, you still harbor that goal, that dream, and you know that you are good at it. So, welcome on my first step of my friends, because this is where we uncover and discover the behind the scenes, the journey of people who have made it in their life, who have done what they really wanted to, what they had set out, success in whatever definition, whatever terms they mean success for them, but they have achieved it. Because the story, the journey is very, very, very important. And if you can hear them out today, you will find that one important takeaway for you that can help you begin your path towards your journey once again. Let me begin by first introducing and inviting our amazing guest speaker who I have the fortune of meeting in person and actually experiencing her amazing magic. So please join me in welcoming Julie Demsey all the way from, I guess, Australia at this point in time.
Yes, hello. So lovely to be here with you today. I'm sitting in Sydney, Australia, although my accent probably makes you think I'm from somewhere else, which I am originally from the United States.
We are very, very fortunate to have you over here. And I think I'm even more fortunate to have the chance to meet you in person and to be able to invite you on this podcast. So thank you so much for saying yes. Now, before I begin and we get into the journey of Julie, I like to give a little bit of sneak peek about you to our listeners and people who are watching us today. So today's guest is the incredible Julie, a rapid results mindset coach, hypnotherapist. Yes, that's the right word, hypnotherapist. And I know that has got you interested now. And a startup advisor who's all about breaking barriers and unlocking potential. With over 20 years of leadership experience across Silicon Valley and Australia, Julie has coached hundreds of founders and executives, helping them shift their mindset, build confidence, and take bold action. Now, who doesn't want to take a bold action in their life? Whether it's tackling limiting beliefs or mastering high performance habits, she's got the tools to make transformation happen. Get ready for some powerful insights. Julie, welcome to the show. So let's just jump into it. And I'm going to shoot my first question to you, Julie. We want to go back to your childhood and we want to know what was the mindset of the people or the community that you were growing in? How did that impact you while you were growing?
So I think there was a similar mindset probably set upon children that were born in my generation, which is you listen to your parents, you behave, you always finish what you start.
Sincere.
You need to be a good girl or maybe a good boy or whatever. You need to be responsible. You need to be nice. You need to be kind to other people and all of these things. And I was the first of three children. So on top of that, I needed to be responsible for my siblings. If they were out of line, that was my problem, right? You're older, you know better, was what I heard all of the time. And hearing all of these things, I began to realize that I needed to control the environment around me so I didn't get in trouble. I didn't get scolded. If I got hurt, my dad would tell me stop crying and be a good girl and a big girl, and so I suppressed a lot of emotion, right? Because I was always told I was fine, so I was always fine. And all of these things created an individual who is very in tune to everything around her. Somebody who was very self-sufficient and very capable, and always wanting to prove myself that I could do that. I could be that person they wanted me to be. So I became very driven. I became very much a people pleaser, which is something I've had to work on changing. Now, that got me really far in life, right? Working through many jobs, I was always the top of my class, moving up, getting promoted when I was at work, doing all of the things, which was really wonderful. It really propelled me very far. It gave me the conviction to do well and to make sure everybody around me was happy and I was pleasing them.
Wow, amazing, Julie. I think it's a classic story of being the obedient and a sincere child. You do get the perks of it in life, but you do also start questioning a lot of things as
Yes.
and when you go through life. So I want to ask you over here, Julie, when you were being that elder sister, the responsible person, the person who's sincere, who's good, who's achieving everything that is right and that she should be. How did that sort of inform your teenage, or probably let's say your high school? Because that is a very, very fragile ground for everyone, especially for a growing girl and even for boys. But how did that shape you at that point in time? Or are there any interesting stories for us to know?
Listen, I don't know that there's super interesting stories or ones that I want to share now. I think throughout that period of time, I wanted to be everybody's friend. I wanted to be popular. I wanted everybody to like me. I wanted to get all the good grades, do all of the things. Um, and, at that point, like, I was really happy with all of that. I thought that's what I wanted, right? Everything was working out well. It wasn't until I got deep into my career and I realized I was accomplishing everything that I should. And on the outside, everything looked amazing, right? I had a good job. I made decent money. I created a beautiful home. At one point, I, had a husband, all of these things that I'm supposed to want. But there was something inside of me that was just saying, I keep moving up higher on the rung at, you know, in the workplace, but there was something that was missing. And I didn't realize what was missing was me because I was always doing what was expected and I worked harder than anybody. I was always working so hard and so long, and people would say, "Oh, you're such a workaholic." And I'm like,
Yeah.
I guess I was like, I didn't, that's not how I identified. I just identified as this is what you do. Like when I went to college, it wasn't a question of, or university as we call it wasn't a question of, do you go to university? It's which one do you go to? So all of these things were just expected. And I followed on doing all of the expected things. And then one day I woke up and I went, I've done all of the things I'm expected to do. From the outside, I look extremely successful, but something's missing. And what was missing was me. Like I realized one day, somebody said, "What do you want?" I'm like, I don't even know how to identify what I want.
Wow, Julie, this is, I think, very, very interesting that we have touched upon this particular insight over here, which I would like my listeners and everyone who's watching us to kind of take a moment and really listen to what Julie is saying. So I think for any one of us, either it is expected out of us or if it's our own, our own goals. When you're doing well, even if it's not your goal, when everything is going well, it looks like I'm doing everything all right, as you mentioned, because everything was going well. You never really got that chance to sit and think, am I doing something which is not okay for me? Because nothing is as such going wrong according to the standards. And a lot of us, we do keep going and doing things which according to the standards look good and it feels good at that moment, but there comes a point in our life where we start questioning that doesn't give you a fulfillment. You do not feel content. And this is very interesting for for a lot of people in today's world, because there are so many things out there, there's so many options, and it's a standard of a way of living, a way of happiness, a way of life. And if we listen to that and if we make that a guide for our own life, we may be able to achieve that. But at the end of the day, we will have a question mark if that was really who I was, or this is really what I wanted. And if this is what really happiness looks like, achieving everything one after the other, then one should be happy about. But if this is not your real dream, then you will or may have that question at some point in time. You may be really happy about it because that was actually your dream. But if it is not, then even if you have done really well, worked really hard, at some point in time, as Julie mentioned in her journey, you may want to ask that question to yourself. So, thank you, first of all, Julie, for opening up to everyone who's listening to us today, being so candid. It is very, very important that we share our real feelings so that people can understand that how in a journey people really, try and dissect what they really want, who they really are, and how they make their achievements their own. So, Julie, from there, when you mentioned that you began working in your career, and for the period of that time when you were doing extremely well, can you maybe point out a time where there was initial stages where you had started questioning yourself? How was that, and why did that start happening to you?
Well, I think it mostly started because while I was doing well, I was always anxious. Am I doing well enough? Right? And now there's a lot of talk in the world about anxiety and things like that. But back then nobody was talking about it. So I was just bottling all of that up inside. I'm feeling anxious that I'm not doing well enough. I'm feeling burnt out. Nobody talked about burnout. Everybody just, it was a badge of honor. How are you doing today? Oh, I'm so busy. I have so much on. So I just kept going because that's all I knew. Right. And it wasn't till after I moved to Australia 8 years ago. And all I knew was to keep going and do more. And I came here and I was the CEO of an organization supporting female founders. And I realized that they were experiencing a lot of the same things that I started to notice back in the States when I was managing big teams. That it was more often their mindset that was holding them back rather than their skill set. And more importantly, what I noticed is rather than being the leader of the team or the leader of an organization, what I really enjoyed and what I thrived on was working to help people break through those blocks and those barriers. And I had that in the back of my mind, but I didn't really know what to do with it completely. And then I went to the movies with a friend one night, and we were walking home, and we start to cross the street, and a push bike came and took me out flat on the ground. I was okay. Didn't feel okay at the moment. Just a lot of bruises. And I got up to go to work the next morning, and I had to really go slow. I literally physically could not go fast. And as I was doing that, I'm thinking, you know what? Life literally smacked me on the ass. If I'm allowed to use that word here, and showed me that I need to slow down. I need to change something. And I've been doing some meditation and some yoga, and I've started to get some insight into who I was and who I wanted to be. But it was literally that moment with that impact when I realized I needed to slow down. I can't continue to go fast. I can't continue to plan a day where I have meetings for 8 hours a day and then I go home and do work after that. Something needed to change if I was to have the quality of life I wanted. And I had to really look at what brought me joy. And so the next day I went in and resigned. I resigned from my job. I had no idea what I was going to do, except that I'd been in Australia for 2 years by then, and I'd promised myself I was going to see all of Australia, and I'd seen nothing. I'd seen nothing at all because I was working so much. And I just took some time to travel, and I thought, what do I want to do? I started thinking about that. And while I was trying to figure out what was next, people who I'd worked with before started calling me up and saying, "Can I hire you as a coach?" And for years, people had said to me, "You'd be a really good coach," because I was always taking on more leadership and helping other people in teams in the corporate space. And I always thought, that's not important enough. I need to be the CEO. I need to be this and that. And then I thought, who says? Who says? Like, what really actually brings me joy, I'm realizing, is being a coach. And I want to figure out how can I help people make these shifts more rapidly and learn more rapidly than I did. So I started doing some research to figure out how I can help people make those shifts more rapidly. And I came across a hypnotherapy program called Rapid Transformational Therapy. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. This is where I can help people really make significant change really quickly. And so I just set on the path to learn that and created my new career.
I love the fact that you have taken us through your journey of how you came about being who you are today. There are a few themes that I see in what you have shared with us right now. And the first one is about, you mentioned, when I went traveling, I asked me a question, what brings me joy? That is such an important question to ask ourselves. The second thing I notice is that when you mentioned that a lot of people call me asking if I can be their coach, and even in earlier, like back in the day in your early career as well, like people asked you, can you coach us? But you never really thought about that. This is one question I want to ask you, that why do we neglect our voices if we feel something, we have an inclination? But I think you've given an answer which was more about because you wanted to be a CEO, and then you were like CEO versus being a coach, and then eventually your mindset did change. So this is one point where I want to delve a little deep, because I think we all suffer from this mindset. I can say that, we all want to be up there, we all want to have that tag, we all want to have that designation, that role that looks really well on LinkedIn and everywhere else. So for everyone who's listening to us today, I want you to help us understand that initially why you neglected, and second, how that mindset change shift happened for you first.
Yeah. Well, I think I neglected it because, again, the way I was raised was you continue to go up the corporate ladder, right? And you continue to take that next position. And I always wanted to be central to the business strategy and growing the business and doing all the things. To me, that's what I was taught success was. And being a coach, I didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything personally. What do I have to show for that? And as I started to take on some of that coaching and really see, I realized that I don't need that. That was ego. I don't need that personal gratification of being able to say, I launched this product, I built that business. How much more rewarding is it if I can look and say, I've helped all of these people create and live the life that they want to live. And I've done that in a way where I get to live the life that I want to live too. So instead of working for 8 hours in meetings, running from place to place, and then having to go home and do all of the work on the computer that didn't get done during the day, I can set my schedule for when I see clients. And I can go for a swim break in the middle of the day because that brings me joy and fulfills me. And I started to realize that those things are much greater success than, I'll be honest, like I am not making the same income I was making when I was a corporate executive. But that cost a lot for my health and my well-being. And I am far happier where I am now doing what I'm doing. And I personally feel like I'm having a greater impact on the world because I work with so many amazing clients that are having impact and they're carrying that out exponentially.
I love this, Julie, that you have taken us deep into your thought process of why you neglected that and why then the mindset shift happened for you. If I may emphasize on a few things, that is like my takeaway. I would say the first thing that I understand from your journey is that, you know, the reason I think the community or the atmosphere or the environment that we are growing, we used to grow up, there was more about, getting into corporate out there, getting good job because you get good pay and then you have security. So I think that is all our parents wanted for ourselves. But times have changed where you can and you have that ability to think about your security and your happiness in many different ways now. But I think we always had that freedom. But it is the way society now they think about things, what success means, what
Yes.
what it can lead to happiness. And that is why at the very beginning I always mention in the podcast that whoever we get the chance to speak to on this podcast, they have different definition of success, but because they have fitted that definition of success and they have achieved it, that is why they are leading a happy life. So it is all about having your definition of success. You may be really good at in corporate and that's what you want for yourself. That is a great success. But you may be in a case, you have strengths and you have more talents, which will be able to help other people, or maybe in a different service, in a different capacity, and not being in this particular field. So figuring out what really works for you is very important. What brings you joy, as Julie said, is important. So, Julie, from that space, when you did take up, I believe you did not really have a challenge of getting the clients, because it was the other way around. You were being called by people left, right, and center because you have left that impact. They had already experienced that from you. But when you start your own business, as you mentioned, it takes a lot of courage, a lot a big leap of faith, and you need to have certain things in mind, because ultimately being able to financially support yourself is so important going forward. So before I ask that question regarding how you really overcame that initial hesitance of starting your own business, I also would like to just tell my listeners today that you may not be in the position of just starting off with something that is not paying you well, because you may need to have money to sustain yourself if you're living in a different country, or if you have some debt or something that you maybe support your parents. You can still do the work that helps you with money, but on the side you can also start working on things that gives you joy, which eventually can help you give more money, and then you can work on that. So Julie, coming back to what I really wanted to understand from you, did you have that big scare? And if yes, how did you overcome that? And if no, what made you not feel that scared?
Yeah. So let me just start by saying yes to what you just shared. Everybody's in a different situation, right? And you need to take that into consideration 100%. There are very few people that I would recommend that they just quit their job and start something new. The majority of people, and I work with a lot in this situation, I recommend to them to start working on something on the side. And the first part of that is figuring out, what do I want my life to look like, right? And for me personally, there are definitely fears around that. I was in a fortunate financial situation from the work I had done to say, okay, if I'm, taking a little bit of step back financially to get started, that's okay. And I kind of set up for myself. And if somebody is doing the same thing, take a look at how much money do you need to make by when to be able to sustain your lifestyle. You don't ever want to leave yourself in a position where you are financially insecure, right? So, for example, I worked with a couple of founders the other day, one who basically said, I don't know how I'm going to make rent this week. And I said, put your startup aside and go back to your day job and work on that, right? Because you need to be able to make rent, and you're not going to, from a new company, make that money right away. I worked with somebody else who said, listen, I supported my husband through a decade of his startup, and now it's my turn. So financially, I have some freedom
Amazing.
to work on it. So very different answer for different people, right? So I would say it's so important to say, what is my personal situation? I was fortunate that I'd set myself up in a situation where I'd be okay. I didn't have fear of starting my own business, I think because, well, I've been working with startup founders forever, and I'd started my own companies previously. Um, and I knew that I had a strong enough resume that if this doesn't work out, I can go back and get a corporate job. But it was really important to say, what are those timeframes and those milestones if things don't move forward? I think my biggest fear was, I feel very responsible for my clients in terms of the interactions I'm having. I don't ever want to do harm to anybody, right? I want to help them. And so there was an inside voice a little bit, if I'm being really honest, where I'm like, what if I don't help them? What if something happens, right? And so I kind of had to then flip that around and say, but what if I do? And I started working with that first client and that second client and seeing the impact that I had and realizing that that sort of collaboration with my clients was something that had, exponential value to them. And that together we could work through any of this. And the more I worked, the stronger my capability became, as well as my intuition. So my intuition is my secret sauce, right? Because I can go through and work with clients the same way other people can, but I've honed that intuition for myself and for others to be able to say, okay, what's the next best step? And help people really get to understand, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? What do I want my life to look like? And so to me, it's a matter of just believing in yourself to be able to move whatever it is forward. And the people that I see and that are doing the best work are the ones that set aside that worry and say, okay, I'm going to focus on what I can do and what I can make happen. And that's what I'm going to fill my mind with.
After listening to you, Julie, I am reminded of something that my mom used to tell me, that nothing in life goes waste. So the responsible, sincere, obedient, and a very organized little girl who was growing up, uh, I could see because her listening to her, because you planned out things. You did not just jump into things without, being practical about it, yet listening to your voice, but how to make things work, by when, how things will work out for you financially, and even going ahead when you were thinking, you're talking to your own mind and thinking, what if I'm not able to help, but flipping that around, what if I'm able to help, having that sense of responsibility, thinking so logically at the same time. I love the blend that you have, and I think that is amazing, and that really stems from, I think, your upbringing as well, which is great. So thank you so much, Julie. It has been such an amazing time chatting with you. I'm sure there has been so many more interesting, maybe, instances in your life which I would have loved to touch upon, but going forward, because we have reached a point where you were in a career which you were doing amazingly well, but things did not click for you. And then something happened, which I'm really sorry to hear about, that you had to kind of go through that situation to be able to slow down. So everyone who's listening to us today, don't wait for such situation. Please listen to that's why we have these kind of conversations. That's why I think it's so amazing that Julie is here, and she's being so honest, she's being so open to share everything about us. It's always nice that if you can learn from other people's experiences, that slowing down means just to sit with yourself and ask yourself a few questions if you've been feeling anxious, even if you're doing well. So Julie, now that you are this amazing coach, you started working into hypnotherapy, I want to ask you that what is about hypnotherapy that really draws you towards it, and how are you helping your clients with that?
What I love about hypnotherapy is it is so fast to make change, right? In traditional therapies, you might go different types of talk therapy, you go back again and again for weeks and months. In hypnotherapy, because we're able to bypass the conscious mind and access the subconscious and find out what is it that's been blocking us from moving forward and shift that, we can do that often in one session. So the change is rapid. And I love that, because while it's important to sit with ourselves and understand what's going on, it's also important to be able to take action and move forward. And I love being able to help people and support them with that. relieving traumas, relieving hurts, anxieties, all of these things very rapidly is a really wonderful thing to be able to do. And I see that happening on a regular basis with the clients. It's amazing. They come out and we have something we call the hypnotherapy facelift because you come out, you
Love
might be weighted down by life and you come out and there's just this lightness because we've been able to shift the things that have been holding us back. We've been able to shift different blocks. And so this modality to me is something that's so wonderful. And then coupling that with mindset work, because the words that we use for ourselves and how we talk to ourselves are so important. I had somebody say to me the other day, I hate something about blah, blah, blah about myself. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's a really strong word. How can we shift that language? This isn't my best quality. However, I have these other great qualities. It's really important to bring all of that back home so that we're feeling that self-worth and that self-love, because that is how we move forward and create our best lives.
exciting. I think whenever you give examples, it just makes me realize even more about, how we talk to our own selves and what we may be doing wrong. Even though we do have that capability, it's just the way that we think about our own selves and that we do not give ourselves much more time to understand that where or how we would like to make that change for the best of our, times to come. So I would just want to kind of as we are coming close to the wrapping of this episode, I would like to kind of ask probably one of the second last question to you over here is that now that we know about the young Julie, the Julie in teenage who was acing everything in the career, and then there came a point where she wanted to slow down, and now you are the hypnotherapist coach who loves what she's doing, the techniques that you have learned and using, and you're really helping people and it's also carved a life for yourself which you really wanted. So as you mentioned, you love to give actionable steps. Now I wish we could have a very quick hypnotherapy on the session on this podcast, but for our listeners today, if you can maybe give us top 3 questions, guidelines that can help them maybe start their own journey today.
Yep. Okay. The first is to notice your thoughts. So once you stop and you notice, what are the things I'm thinking? If there are negative things that I'm thinking, ask yourself, are those really true, right? Is it really true that I'm not good enough? Then look for the proof points that's not the case, right? Anybody who's listening to this podcast is somebody who wants to better themselves. So the chances are that you've had a lot of successes in your life. So stop and notice your thoughts, look for proof points, ask if it's true, look for proof points it's not, and then shift that to the positive. Instead of I'm not really good at that, you know what? I'm getting better at this every day. I'm practicing and I'm getting better. I'm doing my best. And start giving yourself positive words and positive affirmations. Another really actionable thing is many of us at the end of the day go through our list and go, oh gosh, I didn't do half of my list. And then we berate ourselves for not getting anything done. And so I would encourage people, because sometimes we need to look through that list and say, here are the things I didn't get done and I need to get those done tomorrow. But I would encourage people to then look at all the things you did get done and congratulate yourself for that. And also, what are the things that weren't on your list that you got done? And remind yourself that you are a smart, capable human being. So what you did is you shifted out the less important things for the more important ones, and you got that taken care of. And maybe it wasn't something in your control. Maybe it's that you're a parent and you had a sick child and you needed to take care of them, so you didn't get something done for work. Well, guess what? Pat yourself on the back and congratulate yourself for putting a higher priority on the well-being of your child, because that was most important. So we need to look at those things as positives instead of negatives. So that at the end of the day, we're thanking ourselves and being grateful to ourselves for the things we did do and the things we did accomplish. Because that sets the brain up towards action and towards more action, because you're saying, I can do these things and I will do more of these things tomorrow. And guess what? if you had a day where all you could do was shower and then lay on the sofa and watch silly TV because you had no energy for anything else. We need days like that to recharge sometimes too. So be grateful to yourself that you're smart enough and capable enough to know that I needed a recharge day. And all of us need those. I always love to hold this up and say, what do we do with this at the end of every day? We plug it in and recharge it. Why would we do that for our phone and not for ourselves?
Absolutely love this analogy, example, whatever you call it. Thank you so much, Julie. You have very, very nicely, able to kind of give us those couple of actionable steps for us to really understand that how we can make our lives better for our own selves. I think if I would like to summarize from what you mentioned, it would be in the way that in the age of social media where we are scrolling the screens, scroll the most important screen, which is your own mind. This is amazing. Thank you so much, Julie, for being on my first step ever. And I would highly encourage everyone who's heard Julie, who's seen Julie today. I know that you will be excited to learn a bit more about her. So I will leave a lot about her link in the show notes. So you do check that out. But before we take your leave, I always request my guest speakers to leave our listeners with a quote or a saying that they really resonate with.
My favorite saying is you can say you can or you can say you can't, and either way you'll be right. So say
That is so. Please go on.
Yeah, no, that Henry Ford said this years ago. And your mind goes to what it believes to be true. So if you tell your mind, I can't do this, you likely won't be able to. But if you tell your mind, I can, you can make it happen. And that's how our brain works. If we set a goal and we say, I know I'm going to do this, even when we're off doing something else, our brain in the background is trying to figure out how it's going to get to that goal. So you can say you can, or you can say you can't. Either way, you'll be right. So my addition to that is say you can.
I think I totally agree with you. I cannot agree more on this because there have been instances in my life where, I have told myself in the morning, I will get this done. And for some reason, whatever chaos is happening in that day, I have got that particular task done. And I think that is the case for everyone. And thank you, Julie, for reminding us that what power our brain really contains and that the power that we have to make it work in the direction that we want to. So thank you so much for handing the power that we have back in our hands. So thank you on being on my first step ever. Such a pleasure to chat with you. And I love the way you speak. It is so calm, it is so concise and so clear, and it just makes so sense. So all the sense. So thank you so much for being on my first step ever. And to all my listeners out there, I like to say that start believing in yourself and keep believing in yourself. And see you next time. Please do give ratings and please do write your comments. And you can directly reach out to me on my first step ever _IN. That's my Instagram handle. A little about myself. I have always loved performing on stage, acting, speaking, and just emoting myself. So I use these medium different ways so that I can connect with people, help them, empower them, infotain them, which is to inform them and entertain them. If you would like to collaborate for any opportunities, more than welcome to connect with me on my Instagram handle. Thank you.